The truth about Steven's growth, the most powerful arc in animation. Steven Universe is more than colorful gems and catchy songs.
I will fight to be everything that everybody wants me to be when I'm grown.
It's an emotional journey through one of the most evolved character arcs in modern animation. Steven is at the root of this creation, whose growth and struggles lead to transformations that become drastically relatable to an older audience. If you have not had the good fortune of watching this series yet, then honestly, what are you even doing with your life? Steven's story is the emotional thread through which a narrative tapestry centered around identity, trauma, and family relationships all hang. Let's get into Steven's character arc and see how this seemingly lighthearted kids show does such nuanced themes with such a level of emotional depth that resonates with any person who has ever been through growing up, self-discovery, or the weight of their family's past. When we first meet Steven in the early seasons of Steven Universe, he's really just the embodiment of youthful optimism. Chubby-cheeked, big-hearted Steven is cheerful, naive, and always ready to help the crystal gems, Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl, on protection duties for Earth against threats. Right off the bat, Steven is different from his magical guardians. He is half human, half gem. But whereas all the other gems are ancient beings of vast experience and power, Steven is still simply trying to work out what it means to be himself. A lot of the focus in those early seasons falls to Steven just trying to figure out his powers. He lacks complete control over them, and besides, unlike the other gems, he can't summon a weapon right away or shapeshift on command.
I want a tiny floating whale to give me some fin.
What Steven does possess, though, is this remarkable belief in the good of people, or gems for that matter. His strongest asset is his empathetic nature. There is a certain innocence in the makeup of his character so endearing, while watching Steven fumble his way through these early adventures. Beneath the surface, though, one question seems to always loom around. Who is Steven really? While it is easy to get into Steven learning his powers and discovering the secrets of the gems, there is one figure whose shadow looms large over his every move: his mother, Rose Quartz. Even while Steven's early travels are largely lighthearted discoveries, as he struggles with Rose's legacy, a deeper dimension to his character starts to emerge. One of the most interesting features about Steven's character arc is how it interlinks with his mother's legacy, Rose Quartz. Since the very beginning of the show, Steven has to carry this huge legacy on his shoulders. Rose Quartz was the leader of the rebellion against the Gem homeworld, and thus the reason why Earth got saved. Fearless, charismatic, and loved by every crystal gem, she happened to be one of them. But she's also gone. She gave up her physical form in order to give birth to Steven. It really sets up a pretty heavy dilemma for Steven, even when he's too young to understand it. He's constantly compared with his mom. People, or gems, expect him to live up to the examples that she has left behind. Imagine you're growing up knowing your father is a war hero, knowing he's the great leader and the hope of an entire planet. That is some heavy luggage. I mean, for anybody, let alone a kid who is trying to figure out how to summon a shield. It's not just that Steven might feel pressure from those around him to live up to Rose's legacy, but he also tries to work out who she was as a person. Throughout the series, Steven's relationship with his mother was one continually informed by flashbacks, conversations with the crystal gems, and his own introspection. As he learned more about her, Rose's legacy became incredibly complicated. She wasn't this faultless heroic figure that he thought she was. Rose held secrets. She messed up and hurt people, leaving an indelible mark. For Steven, the realization is devastating. It's one thing to fight, trying to live up to an idealized version of your parents and deal with the idea that they may not have been the person that you thought they were. While Steven learned more and more details of his mother's past, his idealistic impression of Rose started to break down. The pressures once hitting the lands in an attempt to be able to live up to her legacy become increasingly personal, and Steven's once unbreakable optimism gradually starts to take a nosedive. This finally sets off Steven's more mature struggle, one where the weight of responsibility takes its toll on his mind and heart. As Steven grows up, so does his arc. Perhaps one of the greatest things about Steven's arc is that the show rarely takes lightly the emotional and psychological toll of his responsibilities. He is a kid who has to save the world, and all because he is not his mother. He is Steven, a fact that becomes much more important as time goes on. Steven's trauma becomes a big theme, especially later in the series and in Steven Universe Future, the epilogue series. Apparently, Steven at first handles everything with his usual optimism, but as the stakes get higher, we see cracks form in his cheerful facade. The things Steven has been through, fighting corrupted gems, dealing with intergalactic threats, uncovering the darker truths about his mother, start to bear down on him. I believe this turning point with Steven takes place at a crucial moment in the series, when he realizes how his complete focus on healing others, both emotionally and physically, has led him to forget to heal himself. Steven had always been the one to offer a comforting hand or an empathetic ear, but he starts to break down under the pressure of always being the fixer. Some of the saddest molecular elements that make up Steven's arc are in how he slowly unravels under the weight of his responsibilities and trauma. In Steven Universe Future, we see Steven struggle with PTSD, anxiety, and feelings of inadequacy. The series gets pretty raw in terms of consequences and trauma. Steven's powers begin to manifest in some really dangerous ways, and he genuinely feels like he's losing control of himself. The struggles of identity get stronger as he questions not only his place in the world, but whether he is intrinsically good or bad. It's heavy stuff, but the show handles it with such sensitivity and care. It is here that older viewers with more experience dealing with such emotional turmoil themselves will find Steven's self-care journey truly resonant. The deeper Steven's trauma gets, the cracks in the facade get deeper, but through his pain, a new realization starts to take shape. He is not his mother. Equally, where the demands for becoming a great successor to Rose have defined much of his early journey, Steven finds his own identity in a very real evolution, one that exists outside of hers. Steven's identity is literally like the central theme of the whole series. He is, like I said, always in the shadow from Rose Quartz. But really, his journey towards self-identity really takes center stage as the series progresses. At first, Steven wants to be just like his mother. He idolizes her. But then, the more Steven finds out about her and her past and the choices she made, he begins to distance himself from that ideal. It's deep in his character arc how Steven slowly comes to the understanding that he is not Rose. Sure, he is the product of her legacy, but he is his own person, with values and desires and strengths important in defining from her. Throughout the series, he learns that he has no need to be like his mother in order to be a hero. He can make his own way. All this time, Steven helps others understand that indeed they can change and grow beyond the roles given to them. One of the most striking examples of this is his relationship with the crystal gems. They initially see Steven, early on in the series, as a Rose replacement continuation. As Steven grows up, they learn that Steven is not his mom, and this is just as well. They learn to love him not as an extension of Rose, but simply himself. This evolution is perhaps poignantly told most of all in his relationship with Pearl, who spent millennia in service to Rose. Eventually, Pearl accepts Steven as a person unto his own right, more proof that both are growing up. The farther Steven is out of Rose's shadow in forging his way into being, the more distinguishing of his family through choice becomes important. It is not a form of identity provided as a solo character, but it is one sculpted through love, struggles, and healing with the closest people, his father and the crystal gems. The one abiding theme which informs Steven's development throughout the film is family. Since the very beginning, Steven's relationship with the crystal gems has been at the center of the series. They're his family, though most definitely not through traditional means. Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl each take on motherly roles for Steven, guiding, shielding, and teaching him through increasingly tricky concerns regarding identity and powers. Still, like in any family, they are far from perfect. There is lots of love and support, yet also conflict and misunderstanding, even pain. What is special about Steven Universe, however, is the ways in which it explores the messiness of family dynamics. Each crystal gem has their baggage. Pearl with her unresolved emotions regarding Rose, Amethyst with insecurities, Garnet with being a leader, and Steven is often just caught in the middle of it all. And despite the blemishes, they continue to stay so in love with each other. Then there's Steven's relationship with Greg, his human father. Greg is not your generic cartoon dad. He's a laid-back, somewhat clueless, and generally irresponsible as a parent. Yet, there's something healthily real in Greg and Steven's relationship that shines through. Greg might not know it all, but he loves Steven no matter what. It is one of the most concrete relationships in the show, serving as a great counterbalance to the surreal elements of Steven's life. And then, of course, there is Rose. Steven's relationship with his mother is among the most complicated in the series, even though they never actually meet. Steven does everything with Rose looming over him, and the more he learns about her, the more conflicted his feelings become. It really does an amazing job of showing the complicated feeling that comes from dealing with family legacy. Loving, guilty, confused, and above all, understanding. That which strikes most, though, is something the show doesn't shy away from: the darker aspects of family relationships. Rose's decisions have lasting impacts on Steven, and he does not always feel able to reconcile his feelings about her. The show recognizes that sometimes those we love hurt us, often without meaning to. Yet, at the same time, it shows the possibility of healing for Steven and other characters. The family dynamics, in all of their imperfect glory, are universally relatable. Through the crystal gems and Greg, Steven experiences the joy and pain of deep familial bonds. However, what makes Steven Universe special is indeed not just the depth of these relationships on their own, but how this series tentatively sutures onto emotional themes in a manner truly resonating with older viewers. One of the things that really makes Steven Universe relatable to an older audience is that even within the context of this young protagonist, it can address some pretty mature and adult themes. Steven's character arc is one through an emotional maturity arc as he learns to grapple with his trauma, define himself outside of his mother's legacy, and construct a relationship in mutual understanding rather than expectation. Where the show really shines is in emotional depth, particularly later seasons as well as Steven Universe Future. In Future, Steven struggles a lot with his mental health, possibly one of the most raw, real depictions of trauma in modern animation. From being the hero for everybody else to finding himself in a position where he needs to protect himself for once, that transition is so relatable to older viewers. Trauma, identity issues, family relations, the show goes deep, right inside the emotional core, not superficially at all. Whether it's Steven working through his feelings about Rose, trying to balance the weight of his responsibilities with his own needs, or even learning that heroes need help sometimes, Steven Universe really doesn't avoid the messy, complicated emotions of growing up. Fairly big roles from supporting cast also help Steven in many of these growing steps, though Steven's story is a lot more central. Each of them, ally or antagonist, reflects parts of Steven's turmoil, interweaving a complex web in which growth and healing become interlaced. How all these relationships, from antagonists to allies, are to represent different facets of Steven's growth shall be evident as we go through what these relationships are. It shows that the characters around Steven reflect and feed into his personal journey. While Steven Universe may bear Steven's name, the show is full of vital side characters that drive his growth and help to further contextualize many of the show's core themes: identity, trauma, and healing. The array of characters that populate this universe, from Garnet and Amethyst to Pearl, Paridot, Lapis Lazuli, and even the Diamonds, adds deep layers to Steven's story, each mirroring certain key facets of his own struggles. Garnet is the fusion between Ruby and Sapphire, symboling unity and self-acceptance.
I will fight for the place where I'm free to live together and exist as me.
Since she is the stable fusion, she characterizes how embracing multiple facets of oneself creates strength. Her leadership and calm demeanor guide Steven through the inner turmoil he feels upon wrestling with his dual identity of half human, half gem. It further enforces the fact that identities are complex yet powerful when Steven learns that Garnet is a fusion. Through Garnet, Steven learns one of the most powerful lessons. His being different is a source of strength, rather than something to hide. Amethyst's storyline is much tied into self-worth and feelings of insignificance.
I will fight in the name of Rose Quartz and everything that she believed in.
Whereas the rest of the gems had origins elsewhere, Amethyst was created on Earth, and for a significant part of the series, she felt defective compared to everyone else. Steven, often finding himself feeling like he isn't good enough to take his mother's place, finds a kindred spirit in Amethyst. Shared insecurities bond them together, and they come to realize the knowledge of their values is not in meeting the expectations of others, but in accepting themselves as they are. Amethyst's arc teaches people it's okay to be imperfect. Growth comes from embracing who you are. Pearl's relationship with Steven is deeply connected with her loyalty toward Rose Quartz, Steven's mother.
I will fight for the world I was made in. The earth is everything I've ever known.
First, Pearl only thinks of Steven as an extension of Rose, consumed by her grief and deep attachment to the memory of his mother. Over time, Pearl learns to let go of her past devotion and comes to see Steven as a person in his own right. Surprisingly enough, it becomes instrumental in the development of the two characters. Steven finally feels he need not live up to his mother's ideals, and Pearl finally grasps the fact that healing comes from embracing the present rather than the past. Pearl's is a heart-stopping journey of bereavement that shows one does not have to forget the past in order to move forward. Paridot and lapis lazuli reflect the show's exploration of trauma and recovery. Paridot starts off as an antagonist, but through her friendship with Steven, becomes this more understanding character and realizes strength does not mean control, it means growth. Where Lapis is a character sucker-punched by traumatic emotional experience from when she was abused. It shows that the slow recuperation process is often very long and painful to tread on the path to recovery. Steven's kindness and patience with her reflect an understanding that healing time is needed, and support given helps people find peace. The Diamonds, being the clear antagonists of the show, represent the generational trauma that Steven tries to heal. Those who at one point in time seemed to be tyrants are given a chance toward redemption as Steven extends empathy towards them, seeking reconciliation rather than revenge. Steven is forgiven even after they hurt him so much. The capability of forgiveness is really complex in this show. This arc defies conventions on good versus evil and proves that even the ones who have caused hurt can change. In Steven Universe, some rich explorations of identity and trauma come with the unity of Garnet, the self-worth of Amethyst, the grief of Pearl, the growth of Paridot, the healing of Lapis, and the redeeming of Diamonds. These characters would help Steven find out that personal growth is actually all about embracing perfections, healing old wounds, and finding compassion even in the hardest places. But it's the way each of Steven's friends and allies informs his growth, shaping him into the person he will ultimately become by the time the series concludes. Ultimately, Steven's arc is one of self-healing, learning to love one's imperfections, and finding peace within after so many trials. His journey is one of testament to the resilience of the human and gem spirit. By the end of Steven Universe and its epilogue series, Steven's arc is one of healing. He's no longer the innocent, optimistic kid we met in the first episode, but that's okay. He is now stronger, more self-aware, more sympathetic, not only towards others, but also towards himself as a result of his experience. For older viewers, Steven's story is a reminder that growth isn't linear. We all get into our points of doubts, our fears, and pains, though in due course, with support, it gives one a way of healing. Steven Universe has shown one that it is okay not to have all the answers, it is okay to struggle, and that at last we can find peace within ourselves. Eventually, Stephen builds up an arc that crescendos into one about resilience, love, and self-expression, something any artist, or virtually anybody who has had to navigate the growing pains of life, can strongly relate to.